Hi YouTube, this is Evie. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be continuing my collar and gear series. I'm going to be going over what collaring ceremonies are and what collaring ceremonies are like. Now, like everything in BDSM, collaring ceremonies are extremely individual and personal. So if I don't talk about something that you did in your collaring ceremony, or if I don't cover something that you want to do for your collaring ceremony or anything like that, don't feel like either one of us is wrong. It is just completely up to your personal preference what you choose to include or not include in a collaring ceremony. This is not meant to be like any sort of exhaustive list or guide of what all collaring ceremonies have to be like. That's not really my intention with this video. I just want to go over with some very common themes that exist with collaring ceremonies. But what actually is collaring and what are collaring ceremonies? So collaring is seen a lot like getting married or getting engaged in a BDSM relationship. Not everyone feels the same way about collaring ceremonies. Some people think they're actually even more important than getting married. Some people agree that while it's a big step in a relationship, it's not really important just due to the different legal ramifications and the different financial ramifications of getting collared versus getting married. But the general consensus is that it is a really big step forward for a relationship and it is a very serious commitment. So my advice for that is don't rush into getting collared the same way you wouldn't rush into getting married or having a wedding. You wouldn't want to spend the rest of your life with somebody that you weren't absolutely certain that you wanted to spend the rest of your life with. And it's the same way with the collaring ceremony. While you don't have the same legal and financial ramifications that you do with a wedding, it is a very big test of the strength of a relationship, and it does have a lot of ramifications for the emotional stability and the level of trust in a relationship. Because of the fact that collaring ceremonies are very often either the transition to or continuation of a 24/7 total power exchange relationship, you have to be absolutely certain that you can trust this dom, because a lot of times in collaring ceremonies what's happening is that you're saying you are committing yourself fully to this dom, you trust them with all of your decisions, and you're really handing over your autonomy to them. This may or may not be symbolically giving up your autonomy. It is also quite common that you are actually giving up all of your decision making power, and that is a really big commitment. I know when you're 18 or 19 and you're just absolutely in love with somebody, maybe you've been dating for a couple months and you can't help but thinking about how awesome it would be to, one day get married to them, or maybe you're thinking about wanting to propose to somebody or something like that, just take your time and slow down. If the relationship is meant to progress to this level of commitment, it'll last for a couple of years. You don't have to rush into anything, and it gives you time to really test the relationship and really get to know somebody. That is extremely important in a BDSM relationship. If you have any problems with your kinks or your limits or anything not matching up well, that'll be pretty apparent within the first couple years of a relationship, and that can be a pretty big deal breaker if you're deciding whether or not you actually want to be collared by a dom. So a collaring ceremony is to being collared what a wedding is to getting married. While the actual being collared part of it can be really quick, a wedding or a collaring ceremony can be really long. Like a wedding, additionally, a collaring ceremony can have a really wide variety of themes and types. Most often you'll see them be sort of smaller affairs with a very trusted group of kinksters or friends that are okay with you being into BDSM or that know about it, that witness the ceremony. Oftentimes you will also have it just be between the sub and the dom in a very private affair. You can also have it where it's like this huge gathering, because a lot of times they are combined with weddings and you'll have hundreds of people, friends, family members, people that are just in the community, and it'll last for hours, and sometimes they're only like 20 minutes long. It's really up to the individual people who are getting collared. But what's important about a collaring ceremony is not really the people who are attending it, or how big it is or how much money you spend on it. It's really about what's being said and being done during the ceremony itself. Like a wedding, you will normally see people exchange vows, although the language is normally a little bit tweaked. So there is normally, all the, sickness and in health and all of that stuff. But something that I see pretty often that gets changed is when you get married, it's until death do us part. But sometimes in collaring ceremonies, people will be like, until, death and beyond, because collaring ceremony is supposed to be symbolic of your depth of commitment. And if you're so committed to a dom that you want to be collared by them, you're, willing to follow them, into death, beyond the grave, and continue to serve them. And in addition to the vows, you will also see, of course, like the exchange of wedding rings, the sub actually being collared for the first time. Normally, this is with sort of a permanent locking collar or a durable metal chain collar that is normally meant for long periods of wear, although sometimes, especially in the pet play community, you will see really fancy ribbon collars that are locked in the back that are meant to be removed when you shower or at certain times of day, although generally, in the larger BDSM community, they are eternity locking collars, which are pretty much non-removable unless you have somebody else do it for you. And to go along with the locking of the collar, you will also normally see either the signage of a contract, the presentation of a contract. This can be either a contract that was already previously used in the relationship, just sort of being re-signed after being renegotiated. It could be the creation of a whole new contract, or maybe it's the first time that you've had a BDSM contract in a relationship. These can be as long or as short as you want them to be. I actually have another video where I talk about what's in contracts and how people negotiate them. I will link it down below if you want to watch it, because that's a whole other, 6 or 7 minute long video there. But the contract and the actual putting on the collar is what's really important about having a collaring ceremony. Beyond that, it is just really up to the taste of whoever is having the collaring ceremony. Like I said, sometimes they're combined with weddings, sometimes they're not. Like, sometimes they're extremely formal, sometimes they're really casual and they're really quick. They're only like 15 minutes long. Sometimes they're really extravagant white tie or black tie affairs, and sometimes they're just in somebody's room or in their outside garden or something like that. But no matter how big or how small a collaring ceremony is, they're always such really beautiful and emotional affairs. It is definitely a privilege to be able to witness or be invited to one. If you're thinking about going through with the collaring ceremony or being collared, I would definitely recommend just like a quick Google. It is really nice to be able to read about other people's stories about what it was like when they were collared, and gather some ideas about where you could go, about what you actually want to do in a collaring ceremony. I just really wanted to cover the basics of this. I haven't gone through a collaring ceremony myself, so I don't really have any personal anecdotes to share. Although I have been to collaring ceremonies and witnessed them. Not really my place to speak about, but it was a very private affair. So if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more. That's really it for my video today, but I will be continuing this series later on this week, and I'm going to be talking about actually where to buy collars, where to get gear from, not just in the US, but all around the world. So if you want to see that, please subscribe, and I will see you later next week. Bye-bye.